Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's 4 o'clock. This is the August 16th, 2018 Board of Health meeting. We have a quorum present. Before we get started, I'd like to just remind everybody that this is being recorded by audio and video. For the general public, is there anything that not on the agenda that anybody would like to talk about? Okay. Review of the minutes. Does anybody have any questions on the minutes? No.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Dear management.
Okay. So there are multiple facets to this deer management conversation. One of them is particularly the data that Dr. McNabb has been able to mine and present to us. So I'll yield the floor to Dr. McNabb soon. And also to mention that Mr. Rainwater, Mr. and Mrs. Rainwater from the Rainwater Foundation are here, who would also like to talk about some initiatives that they want to bring up to the boards for discussion. So, Dr. McNabb, would you like to go first?
Whatever.
Okay. The microphone is right over there.
All right. Once again, my name is Todd Rainwater, and I'm the president of the Board of Trustees for the Rainwater Charitable Foundation. I've been coming to the island for about 40 years, summer residence. I'm also the founder and president of the Nantucket Disc Golf Course, and due to that and the history of neurological diseases in our family, we have a strong interest in helping with the Lyme disease issue on Nantucket. So Roberto and I have for a while now been communicating about this, about the multiple ways that this could be addressed. And it sounds like there are just a limited number of ways, one of them being the mice versus ticks thing that we're going to talk about later in this meeting, the genetically modified mice. I think that's great. Our foundation is supporting it. We'll continue to support it no matter what happens. There are a couple of other ways, I believe, that Roberto and I have discussed that could be done, a couple of things that could be done to help reduce tick-borne diseases on the island. One of them being the sterilization of deer. This is something that White Buffalo, as you all might have know about, Anthony DeNicola is doing on Staten Island. It's something they've chosen to do to reduce the deer population there. I believe Malcolm could give the number, but I believe if you get to 80 or 90% or something like that, then there might be a chance for reducing the deer. Unfortunately, that choice is more expensive per deer to do. That choice is ongoing. So you have to keep funding it over and over and over in perpetuity, pardon me. And it's just, to me, that's not the more exciting of the two options. The option that I prefer, and that is certainly the more controversial option, is the elimination of the deer, the eradication of deer. Whether that would be through snipers coming and removing the deer that way, or whether it would be through taking them off the island. That would be a choice that would have to be made if that option was considered. Once again, I know this is a highly controversial option. There are hunters on the island. This would be removing their hobby, their passion, their sport, and I understand that. But as I shared with Roberto, I founded the Nantucket Disc Golf Course. If somebody came to me and said, Todd, we found a way to save hundreds of people over the next 20, 30, 40 years, the pain and suffering of going through a lifelong torturous disease, I would happily remove all my baskets, shut down the disc golf course the next day, and have it be over with. So I would hope to think that if the Board of Health and if the town of Nantucket considered the elimination, the eradication of deer option, that the hunters would be understanding that it would be in the best of the public interest to do. Those are my thoughts. I appreciate your time.
Yes, there's an ongoing conversation we've had, and it's we have supported increased deer hunting season. We have supported these sorts of projects in the past. This is definitely a conversation that we're looking to have with the state. And then there's definitely some information about the deer on the island here, if Malcolm would like to take over.
Thank you. Well, I certainly appreciate your interest and desire. I've sort of, we get pressured all the time, and as I once said, a reporter, people on the island either yell at me because we're not doing anything about the deer, or they yell at me because we want to do something about the deer. And certainly it's possible that reducing the deer population would help. That in itself, unfortunately, is controversial. Some studies, the studies that have shown that to have a correlation between reduced deer population and reduced tick population. Remember, the deer is the carrier of the tick, major carrier of the tick. The deer doesn't carry disease, but they carry the ticks. And it's intuitive that if you have, since deers can carry 20 or 30 ticks and a female can release 2,000 eggs, it's just intuitive that you reduce the deer population, you reduce the tick population. Now, there are studies that don't necessarily support that. Dr. Alsfeld in New York published a study in a reputable journal a few years ago that suggested there was no correlation, that better correlations to some degree was the previous weather, and that actually it related more to the density of mice and chipmunks. We don't have chipmunks, but we certainly have mice. So like everything, reducing the deer is controversial, the science is controversial. So I spent a couple of days kind of digging through the data from Mass Fish and Wildlife, because the idea, the Mass Fish and Wildlife would like the deer number down to about 6 to maybe 10 per square mile. They believe that's good for the deer, that's ecologically and cultural carrying capacity in their terms. Some might say that the human population on this island far exceeds our ecological capacity. Various people have suggested if we get the deer down to 10 per square mile or even less than that, we would reduce the incidence of disease. So where are we? And so I tried to get some numbers. If you would look at the other slide first, you really have to look at all of these at the same time. If it had some time, I would have presented it in a more logical sequence. So if we have to get to, say, 10 per square mile, I have to also add that all the studies that have a correlation between reducing deer and numbers of ticks and tick-borne disease were all done in relatively small places, confined places. Nantucket is 48.5 square miles. We tend to think of it as small, but compared to where the studies were done, it was quite large. So whether, in fact, those correlate or the same as what happened in Nantucket, I can't tell you. But so where are we? The question to me first came as to where we are in the deer population. So if we go through the process and we're all convinced that, in fact, reducing the deer population will make a difference, and I personally haven't convinced that we are, but I may be wrong, where do we have to go and where are we? Well, this is what is driving me a little crazy, is to really get a handle. So the state presently, by their modeling techniques, say we have about 50 deer per square mile. That's their justification, interesting enough, to extending the archery season, and I will get to that in a minute. A few years ago, we did an aerial survey, and that came out that we have about 41 to 47 deer per square mile, probably relatively close. Now, the Massachusetts model is very complicated. What they actually do is take the deer that are killed, they look at the sex, they look at their age, they look at their weight, and somehow magically they put that in a computer and it spits out the deer per square mile. It's a model. Biological models are fine, but all you need is one one thing wrong with it, one assumption that's not correct, and it doesn't hold. So my first question, I'd really like to go back to the state and figure out what is our present level. So I put on here 60 per square mile, 40 per square mile, and the mean of that is in fact, for the number of deer, comes out to about 2,500 deer with a standard deviation about 300 or 400. So however you count it, maybe we have about 2,500 deer. It's not that far off from the aerial survey. But that was 5 years ago. And this is when I'll go through some of the other information, I'll show you what's bothering me. It may not be bothering me, I just don't understand. So I put in here the 2004 hunt. Remember, we had an extended season in 2004. It went into February 2005, but the state actually records that in 2004, even though it was the calendar year 2005, which is probably correct because it's essentially the same type of deer herd. The difference is that in February, the females are pregnant, and they're not necessarily pregnant in the early part of the season. So I did some calculations, and all those numbers of percent reduction, of course, could be all dream, because I don't really know what I'm calculating it from. So I'm making gross estimations. What I did do is I sort of looked ahead and said, well, what would happen with the extended archery season this year? It's going to be extended 2 weeks. So if you go back to the other slide, well, we can do it on here where the average harvest in the archery season in Nantucket's about 200 deer. So if we extended that out just by 100 or 200 deer, you would see you would get up reductions of about 26, about 35%. If we actually went to 1,000 deer and used the fact that we had 50 per square mile, or 40 per square mile, at 50 per square mile, we would have about a 40% reduction, and then obviously at 40 per square mile, we'll have a 50% reduction. Of course, I'm babbling on about here, but if you go to the slide that shows the theoretical reduction in time, which is this one. No, it's the other one.
Another one?
There's another graph. There it is.
Okay.
You can see that at 50%, if we got to that 50% level, it would theoretically take us almost 10 years to get to that magic number of 10. If you go down to the blue line to 10. And that's a pretty long time. Now, a controlled paid hunt would obviously potentially get that down to a much lower level if you came in here. The problem is that this is all theoretical, because if you did get a 50% deer reduction, it's going to be harder and harder each year to find the deer. So I'm not sure it's a linear situation. If you go back to the other slide, that one. Now, you can't, the white line represents harvest and the red line density. Based on, if you go back to 2005, 2006, at that point, for some reason, the state's saying we have almost 70 per square mile, which doesn't actually match with other documents they have at that time. So this is one of the confusions that I have. There was a significant reduction in the density from 80 to 50. So that's a meaningful differential. But if you go back to the slide with the blue lines on, again, I apologize for going back and forth. I'll keep going. The other one. There's bars. The bar.
One more. First slide.
The bar. No.
The very first slide. The very top.
Oh, the very first.
Okay. if you see, this is the total of the 2004 hunt, which is quite significant. But what I have trouble figuring out is this is not the number of deer the next year. It's actually the same calendar year, but it's calculated as the next year. The hunt is actually one of the lowest harvests we ever had. So I began to think to myself, well, maybe this is because we had such a significant deer harvest that year. However, this is what's driving me nuts. Because if you go out to 2010 to 2017, the hunters did pretty well. So, and it was almost as much as the 2004, 2005. So why isn't there such a reduction the year after? I don't understand that. If in fact, with the extended season, and we got and we got the count up to 900 or 1,000 even, or even as in the other slide, a more modest figure, we could reach the 40% or 50% reduction in deer. So what I want to do before we get crazy and go ahead with a lot of things, I suspect that if we ask the state for, say, White Buffalo to come in here, first, every time we've asked, they always say no. Their answers now would be, well, let's wait and see what the extended hunt does. That would be a question they would, or an answer they would probably get. But I'm going to ask them back, I want to know, what is our density? And how do you calculate? That should be public knowledge. I could not find it on any of their websites except reference to it, but not the specific density. So I have a lot of questions, and what I'd like the board to do is perhaps write a letter, but not just write a letter with these questions. I need to sit down with them and actually talk to them. What is the density now? How is that calculated? And what about these differences of 2004, 2005? And what do they predict would happen with the extended archery season if we did get the numbers up to, say, 900?
Wouldn't we have another bar lower, theoretically, the way this chart is?
Well-
The extended hunt?
The extended hunt, 2018, since it's all going to be done in 2018,
Then that-
it should be up here,
Right.
which should be close, even if we got another 100 deer. Just 100 deer with a 2-week extension. We should go up to this 2004 level. And the state they got very angry with us because we call it off. But that was getting in the range they think we ought to. So maybe, in fact, the point of all this babbling, if you'll excuse me, is that with the extended hunt, we may get back to that 2004, 2005 level, or even beyond it. I don't know. This is all speculation. The only numbers that are accurate, well, these are actually counted dead deer. All the other stuff is models and speculation and blah, blah, blah.
Malcolm, do we know in 2004 how many deer we got from the normal end
Yes.
of deer season?
577, and there were only 240.
An extra 200, almost 50.
So even if you put those actually in 2005, that line would be up
Right.
here. So I don't know if this is making it look better or worse than it is. The problem is the nature of the deer in February are different because the females are pregnant,
Right.
which probably makes, I don't know how they calculate that in the model. So all I'm saying is, it makes sense that reducing the deer population will reduce the disease. Although if Osfeld was in the room, Professor Osfeld, he would tell us that's not true. It's like whenever you get a bunch of experts together, if you get 10 together, you'll get 20 opinions. So who knows? But I think it's worth pursuing. Right now, I think it's time. It's really been 4 or 5 years since we really did any kind of analysis of this problem. And I don't want to spend the next 2 years doing it. I don't think we need another aerial survey because I think it came out pretty close to where the state was. Plus, they're extremely expensive. We got a break on the one 5 years ago because they did it in conjunction with Martha's Vineyard, so they could fly over both islands. It would cost us $17,000, and we'd have to do it every year. It's a problem of doing any of these things. You have to do it every year. You just have to do it every year. So my questions are: what is our true density? How's that density calculated? Help me explain this 2004, 2005 numbers. Why we haven't seen anything like it? If that's the levels that we have to get in harvest, then the 2015, 16, and 17 seasons were pretty close to it. So in theory, we should have a lower density than we had at 50. I mean, I might not be thinking right, but I have to see the numbers and I have to know how they got there. And then we can say, well, our goal is blank number of deer a year. Any questions?
I just want, are the hunting licenses issued on Nantucket, or do people come with them?
They tend to come with them because they're
Okay.
issued by the state.
Okay. So
It's all online now.
Yeah, it's
I
online.
just looking for another potential data source. I mean, how do you?
Oh, I can get license numbers. That's available.
I just wondered. No, I just wondered if there's any that does factoring in anything that goes around the number of hunters who come have an impact on this. Like,
I haven't looked at that. I bet you the state knows that.
I mean, I just wonder if if you have if you have more hunters, you might have more deer killed.
Well-
maybe not.
Yes, I mean, remember the 2005 hunt was open to the world,
Okay.
and there were a lot more hunters coming.
Okay.
And at one point, we actually asked the state, okay, could we have an extended season, but only for Nantucket hunters?
Okay.
And they said they couldn't do that because the laws are
Right.
open for everybody. But it'll be interesting, again, to see what the extended archery season does. We may be on our way. So then we can say to ourselves, okay, if we can maintain that level, it will take us 10 years. It will take us 5 years. And I think that will be very important in deciding on, whether we should pay hunters, which the state would probably say no anyways.
And what is
always worth an ask.
white elephant? What, not a white elephant.
White buffalo.
White buffalo. What is that?
White Buffalo is a conservation group that does everything from capture and release elsewhere to sterilization to full-on sharpshooting controlled hunts, where they can eradicate large swaths of the population in one fell swoop.
Right. But the other problem we have, I didn't mention at the beginning about reducing the deer, is we have a lot of land on this island that's posted, and you just can't get at it. Even white buffalo would not be able to get into those properties. White buffalo, they use rifles and not shotguns. They use bait. They use all the things that the state doesn't like. We would have to get permission for. Yes.
But two things. Is there any validity to the theory that when the deer population drops, the females tend to produce twins and triplets? I've heard that. I just don't know if it's been proven.
I tried to look at that. Again, I kind of rushed this in the last couple of days. I have in my notes from years ago that 90% of the female deer on this island deliver. The national average is somewhere around 60%. So I don't know. I mean, all I've talked about all afternoon are numbers, and I have no idea if any of them are correct or valid.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the whole problem of this debate. Those that want to reduce the deer population quote their numbers. Those that don't will quote Osfeld, and there's a other study I found that might not support it. That's the problem. Like I said, experts, you get more opinions than you have the experts.
Malcolm,
So we have to be smart ourselves.
I don't know about now, but I remember years ago, the permitting, sometimes one year you could only get you could get a permit for one doe.
Not
That's
anymore.
all. And then, so now it's
No bag limit.
no bag limit
There's
at
no
all.
limit now.
Okay.
And another part about that, if you look at in theory, if you look at the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, then yes, there would be a population explosion after the drop due to abundance of food and lack of mating partners, things like that. But it's again theoretical. It's the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium.
Our venison program up and running for next year? That's been popular and improving.
It's been popular. The second year we had a small dip because it started late because we had lost our processor. But Dylan has said that he's willing to do it in perpetuity. It helps him hone his knife skills.
So I don't know where we're going as a board, but I'm going to draft the questions and ask for a meeting, just out of my own scientific curiosity, so at least I have a sense of where we are, because I think we're kind of wandering out there in numbers and data land, and it makes it very hard to make any arguments without the correct information.
May I share another anecdote? I happened to meet earlier with a gentleman by the name of Michael Guerin, who's the manager of real estate operations for National Grid. He has responsibility for a geographic area from Lake Erie east to the Atlantic Ocean, from southern New Hampshire down to the South Fork or something of Long Island. And they have about 10,000 miles of roads that they kind of under their kind of jurisdiction. And tick-borne disease is becoming a huge factor in their. They've seen a continued rise in tick-borne disease among their employees who are out working, and so it's become kind of for that company, it's become a major concern. So I thought I'd just pass that along.
So I don't know. I leave it over to the chairman as what we do with this very nice request we potentially have. Roberto.
It's always worth an ask to the state. We can definitely meet with the state, and if you'd be willing to meet with us, if it's possible. Oh.
Once again, I appreciate everybody's time, and I'll be quick because I know I've already talked a lot. I want to thank you very much, Malcolm, for all your great research and for considering all the different options. You mentioned that you had found a couple of studies, and once again, we could go on all day about this, and we won't. But just for the record, for the sake of the board, Sam Telford he considers himself one of the hugest proponents of deer reduction to control tick-borne diseases. In fact, in January 2017, he wrote an article in Journal of Pest Management called "Deer Reduction is a Cornerstone of Integrated Tick Management." So for what it's worth, if you want to read the flip side to that article, you can read his. And it'll all just come down to who we trust there. So I understand there's certainly two sides to it. Also want to say that the RCF strong preference, we're open to all the different options, but our strong preference is towards the elimination of the deer. We feel that it's going to be, if we start to reduce the numbers, as I mentioned before, it's going to be like a treadmill, and we're going to have to keep putting money into it. And if we leave, I can see the possibility of the island not having the resources to, oversee that continual reduction if that's needed. And then finally, I want to just mention that at the current time, we actually have a total of $1 million set aside, depending on the results of your work. I look forward to hearing more from you all in terms of what you all find and what the options may be. But if this works out, we would be very happy to join you in the effort to reduce tick-borne diseases on the island. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, just to remind everybody, about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a ballot question put out to the community about reducing the deer herd, and it did pass 2-1. So.
Right.
I would say if it's the consensus of the board, we can move forward to reaching out and meeting with the state. If at least one of you would like to attend, we can't have 3, but we can have 2.
I'd be glad to attend, but I want it face to face. I don't want to just exchange letters or a phone call, because I would like to ask some of these statistical questions, and you can't do that.
Yes, we would need to go up to Boston, request a meeting at Boston.
Of course, Helene and I almost had a meeting
We did.
with a former director
Got
there
hauled off to jail, right.
who was hauled off to jail the next day or the day before. So it kind of interfered with our,
Ring or something, I don't know.
it interfered with our meeting. But they were willing, he was willing to see us face to face.
Corruption in
Is
Massachusetts?
there a new person at Fish and Wildlife now?
I honestly don't know. There's been so much turnover in the state level that at this point, almost everyone is new. So I don't know how you want to define new. If it's within the last year, possibly. If it's been the last 3 years, definitely.
The rest of the board is consensus about moving forward?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I will.
And also grateful for the potential contribution.
Thank you very much.
Very generous.
I was afraid you were going to say you wanted to buy 4 posters for us.
Been educated.
Please don't.
Okay.
Okay, and thanks. Roberta, director's report?
I'm gonna defer my director's report to the year in review. But just one quick bullet point before we move on. We have been moved to the second round for the hospital's CHIP grant, the Community Health Improvement Plan grant. What we requested was for a nurse, a public health nurse, that would be able to provide everything from regular tick checks and referrals to vaccination, get up and go tests for the elderly population, blood pressure screenings, all the other parts of public health that we are not reaching right now. So we moved on to the next one, and there's a meeting on Tuesday at 5:15 at the Landmark House, a face-to-face meeting. I heard about it today, so I'm going to see if you can attend. And they've requested presence at least one board member. And that would be, hopefully that'll be a really great thing for us. We will know by December if we received that grant.
What exactly is the CHIP program?
So with the new hospital, the state requires that a certain percentage of the money get returned to the town or its immediate catchment area as a community benefit. The hospital here is doing something different where they're going through grant process rather than doing your typical community benefit, which is actually quite groundbreaking. Dr. Joshua Sharfstein at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and myself, we actually were just recently put in the Journal of the American Medical Association forum. We were just published last week talking about how nobody has ever done it the way Nantucket has done it. We're groundbreaking on a national level, which is really great to hear. And the trend of funding things like education, like the STEM playground that was being funded by the Mariah Mitchell, that's never been done before. And it is a new view of community hospital benefits, and it's really moving forward in a great way. So they're extending a grant program of approximately $800,000 every year to fund these sorts of community benefits. And we applied for 100 to fund a nurse for the next year.
Zero Monahanset.
Yes. So I'm going to have to recuse myself on this one. The Zero Hansen is requesting a variance for a fee waiver for a septic application for a affordable housing unit. I am on the board of directors at Housing Nantucket, so I would have to recuse myself for this discussion.
Thank you to the board for hearing me today. My name is Andrew Mulcahy. I work for Housing Nantucket. I'm requesting a waiver of the fee. We, at Housing Nantucket, we're the largest 501c3 nonprofit tackling the affordable housing crisis here in an effort to keep costs down. And basically, we need to perform component repairs on a sewage disposal system at Zero Monahanset. I think it will probably be quite costly, and was just requesting that the board consider waiving the permit fee there.
Yeah, that's town-owned property too, wasn't it? The Zero Monahanset, was it town land?
I believe it
Yeah, it
was.
was, yeah. I think we given these variances in the past.
How much is the fee?
600.
600?
I have no problem with it.
You guys good?
Yeah.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 14 Medawi Creek.
Yes. So the next one is also a there's a request for a variance for the local regulation 64, which would require the IA component to be installed at the system. There is deemed a technical failure based on 5.99 foot of separation. The staff denied we declared this as a technical failure, and the applicant is appealing that to the board. So, Mr. Yuan, if you would like to present.
Thank you for the time. So the issue is relatively simple. I think in 2000 and
If you can introduce yourself.
For the record.
oh yeah, I'm sorry. For the record, my name is David Ewan. I'm the owner of the property, 14 Medawi Creek Road. We purchased the property in 2012, and this is a condition to sale. A Title V inspection was performed in 2012, April 2012. The report is also enclosed, and if you examine that report, the measurement for separation from groundwater was stated and reported as 6 feet in that inspection report, and therefore passed inspection and satisfied the condition for sale. We purchased the property. Fast forward to June of 2017, a Title V inspection was conducted. Noted that it was the same inspector, Ted King, and the agent for the Board of Health was also, who signed the report, was also the same, Mr. Artel Crowley. And it was everything else was pretty much identical, except that it was reported the separation from groundwater was 5.99, and therefore we failed. I also want to note that in both cases, the only data source used for that measure was the survey on file, and the person who did the survey, Blackwell Associates, I actually asked what are the tolerances for those measures, and he mentioned it was 1/8 of an inch, which if you convert it to feet is 0.0104 feet. So therefore, I thought from a technical standpoint, there was actually justification to round up 5.99 to 6 feet. From my standpoint is the decision to deviate from that methodology, where in one case the inspectors rounded up and in another it didn't round up, was resulted in some unfair treatment and which has economic consequences, I think. So this is why I'm appealing that. I think it's, in my definition, it's considered prejudicial treatment when you treat two parties differently and unfairly. Okay.
Any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. On the letter that you wrote, it says here that in 2012, it was stated that it was 6 feet. And in 2017, it's 5.99 feet. And then in the next paragraph, you say, in 2017, they did not round up 599 to 6 as they had done in 2012. But if you go back to that, you say in 2012, it wasn't 5.99, it showed up as 6 feet.
Let me clarify
So we
that.
didn't, they might have, I mean, according to this letter, it was 6 feet in 2012, and now in 2017, it's 5.99. So they didn't round up one and not round up the other one.
Let me clarify. So in my conversations with Artel, he told me the survey in both cases, for both cases, the measurement, the data was the survey that was used to come up to 5.99. And he said in 2012, it was also 5.99. They stated 6 feet, 6.0 feet. My interpretation is that they rounded up. I don't know that for a fact. But it was 5.99 in 2012 as well, according to Art. This is a verbal, right? You know, I don't know how to read the technical survey data, but that's what he said. And so I apologize for the lack of clarity in that letter, or confusion caused
All
by
right,
the
the
letter.
other question I have is, the one that was done in 2012 was before 64 was put into, before there was no 6 foot, there was no number at all.
Oh, yeah, no,
Well,
there
there
was,
yeah,
Yeah.
there was still a number, but the
Yeah.
rules changed. You know, certain rules changed out there.
Right,
You know, IA only.
right. And right,
Yes,
so
the
the thing was put in
regulation-
2015.
Yeah, the regulation was updated in 2015.
It was updated in 2015, and 2015 it said it has to be 6 feet.
Yeah, well, yes, but it's always been 6 feet out there, even when we were doing the inspections when we started in '03, that whole harbor watershed.
I just had some questions for Roberta. So the statement from the person, from the applicant, is that statement of fact? Do you have any qualms or any issues with that? Do you accept everything he said as a statement of fact?
The only what happened in 2012, we were obviously not present. What the way it's been explained to me was the survey data said 5.99, and the director at the time said that's minimal, so it doesn't matter. Mark it as 6. So as if you look at the
So that's an accurate statement. What he's
Right,
okay.
but if
he didn't have the authority to,
which is
without coming to the board.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to understand the facts.
Yeah, which is
that's-
unfortunately-
So the reading was the same, and somebody made the decision to change the consequences of it.
unfortunately,
Okay.
yes,
Yes or no?
he
Yes or-
didn't.
okay,
He didn't
right.
have the authority to do so, which is why in the report you'll see where it says test hole and as-built data shows 6 foot plus or minus of separation, whereas in the 2017 report, I believe it says 5.99 definitive.
What's the sensitivity of this measurements?
1/8 of an inch according to Jeff Blackwell,
And that's-
which is 0.0104 feet.
Yes, I will tell you, not too long ago, we had a very similar situation come in front of us, probably like 8 or 9 months ago,
Yeah, the NISDA cottages.
which was the NISDA property where it was less than a half an inch. And the board wouldn't give them the variance, so.
I want to emphasize once again, I think if I came only with that 1/8 of an inch, it would be a relatively weaker argument. I'm also making an argument that, I don't know what happened in 2012.
Right.
I only can read who signed it, and so it was the same people who signed the thing, and I
I think
That's all.
I think we get where you're coming from, and
Right, yeah.
I mean, I feel bad, but I think the onus goes back to the person who designed and installed the septic, and they messed up submitting the as-built. It didn't get caught then. It should have been, and now we've been entrusted with protecting the harbor, and we're it's very strict out there, and we're.
And the other question is, if you vote for this thing and you give it to him, and the next guy comes in and he's 5.98, then what do we do?
Well, I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
That's why we have 64 that says it must be 6 feet.
Well, with all due respect, 5.98 plus 0.0104 would still not be 6 feet. And then I would also then argue is if it's you should also consider if a previous measurement was also 5.98 and it had been stated as 6.0, I would wonder why that change, from a public perception standpoint. I gave you an example in the letter.
Yeah.
What changed? I'm not quite sure. It's the same individuals involved. I can only read, if I gave this to a newspaper, they will only read the two same people signed off on the report.
So, Mr. Chairman, so I know at our board, we request that the person standing up, I know what your process here, ask questions of members through the chair, and that we try to avoid what's happening now, which is a back and forth, but that's up to you. That's your call. And my only comment is that, so and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying that the person that spec'd this or designed this system would have known and should have known that this needed a 6-foot
Yes. because
measurement,
when they-
and the fact that they didn't really was
Right, when he reads
that's where the error first
Yeah,
started.
right. So when it's
Okay.
installed, he shoots
Okay.
the inverts, he
Okay.
has a minimum elevation, he does the numbers, puts them on the plan, but if you don't check the numbers to make sure you have the 6 feet, in a lot of plans, some of the guys will say elevations are critical, and some of the surveyors will pick up and tell the installer, you don't have 6 feet,
Right.
you gotta raise it up.
So I guess what I'm trying to make is that, whether someone who rounded up or not rounded up, either in 17 or 12, the basis for this started when the system wasn't put in correctly.
Pretty much.
Okay,
yes.
that's where I'm comfortable with that personally.
What, may I answer a question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So the house was built and the system was installed in 2005 when the regulation was in place. Would it be a safe assumption that it required approval by an inspection, that it met the regulation, and that it was approved then as well?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
It has a
Would've-
certificate of compliance.
Certificate of compliance would have had to have been issued.
Stephen, may I?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to answer one question of what changed between 2012 and 2017. The director changed. The previous director retired. The new director came in, which is myself, and I implemented a policy of strict adherence. Because what we were seeing is issues of 0.05 being just given as a variance, which is an authority that the director does not have, the staff does not have, only the board does, which is why it was denied in-house. You're going by the proper channels by bringing it to the board. But I just wanted to give you the answer of what it is that changed.
And the other thing I would add is that I think we all recognize the financial impact of this to property owners, which is one of the reasons the board and the town developed the loan program. So that would be available in this case.
Yes.
And we just added $3 million to it, or whatever, $2 million. So that's a vehicle that would somewhat compensate for the additional cost.
I certainly want to learn more about the loan program. But I also I do think there's a distinction in this case, given the tolerances, the engineering tolerances of 0.01 versus 1/8 of an inch and a half an inch, 1.05. So I would appeal to the board to take that into consideration in this case, that we're not talking about
Yes, I get it.
a egregious difference, and that I'm appealing, and there is some statistical grounding for this, that if you measure this, I don't know what the relevant sample size is, enough times, you can come to possibly 6 feet enough times. And so it becomes a little bit of a chance, and it also becomes an issue of awareness of perhaps at the time, it was deemed or known to be deemed that 0.01 would be de minimis, that the surveyor did not put in 6, even though he could have. I don't know. I'm speculating,
Right.
and I don't want to get that way, but I do want to appeal to the board to consider the distinction between 0.01 and more, given that the plus or minus is 0.0104 in this particular case. And I do understand, through conversation with the auditor, who was very helpful in helping us understand the regulation and the different triggers to installing an IA. And the purpose of my and the other, this is, obviously just qualitative, but the reason I'm applying for variance is not to avoid ever putting an IA tank in. At some point, an IA tank will be put into the property because we would either be selling it or we would be doing something on it that would require it. I'd rather not have the stigma of a failed inspection should we decide to sell the home in place prior to that. Secondly, I also would rather not have this, the failed inspection, force the timing of when we would like to do any kind of renovation on the property. And that's really the only other point. The last point would be, and this is probably not a consideration for the board, perhaps because it's not strictly a health issue, is I really do personally find it unfair, just simply unfair that two people were treated differently. And I understand the circumstances, but I just find that was the only, that was my other motivation to appeal.
Understood.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, it's not really the two people were treated unfair. This board was not here in 2012. This board has a job to do, and the job says that you have to have 6 feet, and you don't have it. We're here to give people variances that have a problem that most of the time can't be fixed, and we've put in place a loan situation so that you can fix that problem. If it was a problem that you had no way to fix at all, then that's why we're here, is for the variance. But you have a way to fix it, and we have a loan program that will allow you to fix it. And the rules say you have to have 6 feet. And as far as I'm concerned, I think you have to have 6 feet.
I think, James, you said it. I've been sitting here debating with myself, looking at, statistics and tolerances and measurements, but I think you expressed it well. We've usually given variances when there was no other option.
Right.
That's been our standard.
So I make a motion that we deny the request.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chairman says aye.
How do I find out more information about the loan program?
Go ahead and give us a call at the office and give you my card. Just send me an email.
Well spoken. So-
I don't know the consequences. Unfortunately, I got to make this public.
$347 Nantucket.
Sorry. I just don't understand why somebody would threaten. 347 Nantucket. This is one of the 3 properties that were affected by the extreme erosion this winter storm, these winter storms in Nantucket. We already approved the tight tank for the 4 Ames Avenue, which is the abutting property. This is the property that was on the agenda last term for a condemnation because they hadn't done the work yet. But the day of the Board of Health meeting last month, the application for the tight tank came in. This is on the mainland side of Millie's Bridge. So it's not part of the tight tank district, so it would require a variance from the board to put in the tight tank. There is no more land for them to install a full septic system, but in order to maintain use of the property, they would need a tight tank. So the staff has no objection on this one. This is one of those you have no other choice situations.
Yeah.
So I make a motion that we approve the request.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Loan update?
Yes. So this is the continuing part of the agenda from last term of if anyone had any suggestions on the loan criteria that I had put in front of the board last month. If you had any suggestions for changes or anything like that, or any clarification that you would like me to provide based on those.
Yeah, I remember I mentioned to you the one thing I mentioned about the tax returns.
Yes.
I thought maybe that would be maybe a deterrent for people to actually apply. It's kind of, being personal.
Yes. No, absolutely. It's an excellent point. So the chair has brought up to my attention that a lot of people do not like to produce tax returns as a verification of income, which is part of the new application criteria that was put in. And that's a great point. To put minds at ease, we can do it by verification of tax return. Another way we can do it is through the way some other towns do it is through showing of the pay stub. We can do the calculation at the same way. Either way, because that is a personally identifiable information, and it can be used. That information can be used as to the detriment of the applicant. Those are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So once that information is turned in, and we make the determination of whether to approve or deny the application for the betterment loan, we can then either not destroy but redact the information from the application so that it does not show up in a information request.
It's common practice in schools, I know, for scholarship applications.
It is.
Yeah.
And any loan. I mean, mortgage or
Absolutely. In our case, it's to determine the income cap rather than an income minimum.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's
And if somebody's making too much that they're embarrassed to ask for the money, then they won't ask for the money. Right?
That's kind of the point.
That's a good point.
It's kind of the point. There was no mechanism in the first $2 million to prevent that from happening. Right. So unfortunately, we did have some applicants who got the loan who made in excess of excessive amounts of income. We'll say that. Right. Well over 200 or 300% of the median income in Nantucket. Is there any other questions or suggestions for the criteria? No. Okay, so I will formalize it, set it up as a full policy and as part of the application for the next $2 million, and then we can take a vote on it at the next meeting.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Mice Project.
Okay, so last week there was a presentation by Dr. Esvelt, not to be confused with Ostelt, which was the other deer researcher that Malcolm was talking about earlier. Dr. Esvelt from MIT came and gave a really good presentation with a panel of an ethics panel and scientific panel from Dr. Weissman from Harvard, Dr. Ruth Faden from Johns Hopkins, Dr. Esvelt himself from MIT, Dr. Sam Telford from Tufts, and Michael, I don't know if it's Spector or Spencer. It's Spector, I believe. Okay, it's Spector. Okay, so it's Michael Spector was moderating it from The New Yorker. He is an author for The New Yorker. It was very well received. It was a packed house. Mr. Rainwater attended as well. We believe that it's moving forward in a very good manner. Dr. Esvelt has tried to stay very open to the public and receive feedback in all sections. And it looks like Dr. Dickler left. So I believe it was really good for those of you who attended. I would love to hear some of the feedback. And as far as the steering committee goes, I will defer to Dr. McNabb.
Oh, I think it was well attended. Questions were good. Responses were good. Steering committee, we haven't met in a while. There hasn't been any real need to, but we have to work out some of the governance of the steering committee, because the steering committee is appointed by the chairman of the board, and it's supposed to give opinions to the board, but we have to make sure we do we need to follow open meeting laws, et cetera, et cetera. So until those issues are cleared up, I don't think we're going to meet. Because I would hate to have us get down to the wire and end up saying the steering committee was secretive. The steering committee has not been secretive, but we have to have a little better way of a public announcement of our meetings, et cetera. Other than that, it's doing well. He's made a lot of progress in the last few months, and he's getting close to finding that the famous small island.
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I thought it was more than well attended. I mean, they could have had it somewhere else. There were so many people standing up, and
Yeah.
you know, it was great.
Well, we will see. We'll see if deer reduction or mice reduction gets done first.
It's a race to the finish. It was just a quick update.
Quick update.
All right.
Year in review.
Okay. So in front of you, you'll see the year in review packet that I printed out. What I've only been able to do is the enforcement side of it, which is the inspections and permitting. Terry, you'll get a copy of this for the minutes. It's not complete, but I wanted to at least give you the very basic draft that I was able to type up and hopefully get it completed for the next Board of Health meeting. I'm hoping to do a yearly report like this every year, especially as the organization changes, as we absorb the human services section, if we were to add a nurse, slowly but surely this information will get a little bit thicker. This packet will get a little thicker. What you'll see in the first few pages, you'll see the table of contents and our organizational chart as it stands right now without the human services. On page 5, you'll see the amount of permits we've issued, how many permits we've given. This last fiscal year, in fiscal year 18, we gave out 869 permits, which oddly enough is 39 permits less than what we gave out in fiscal year 2017. However, that is within what's considered the margin of error, which actually Mr. Yuan was talking about earlier. So it is possible that we had a low number of permits by random chance alone, based on where we are and type of permits issued. I would have to do a deeper analysis of those permits. And then you'll move on to the inspections, which is actually the meat of this presentation. On page 6, you'll see an overview. On page 7, you'll see the 3-year running inspection numbers. It's supposed to be read in a landscape format. You'll see that I have put in what's called a polynomial regression, is to see how well that information is meeting within the statistical analysis and how it's going in comparison to the other 2 years. So the little bars on top of the big bars is the error, the standard error. And if the bars overlap with any of those 2 other bars directly next to it, it means that it could have been caused by random chance. If they do not overlap at all, it means there is something causing this change. So you'll see the analysis actually on the next page, on page 8, where I'd explain how one of the things that we're looking at are, on page 8, you'll see that the data shows that we're starting to see a really pronounced shoulder season. So in fiscal year 2017 and 2018, we saw a significant increase in the amount of inspections in April. We think this is because of the increasing popularity of Daffodil Weekend. And so as a result, restaurants are opening up earlier, and or if they don't want to open altogether, they will pull temporary permits, which also require inspections. And then you will also see in September and October, this last fiscal year, the amount of inspections in September and October skyrocketed. That's more people here, more complaints, more type of use of our services. So it's a solid argument that our shoulder season has been increasing. However, if you look at the months of the 3-year averages of November, December, and then February and March, they're all within that statistical tolerance, which means that our year-round population hasn't really changed in these 3 years. But with the shoulder season going up the way it has, it's an argument. Some of the data is showing that we are definitely getting more of that tourism use. So even though our year-round population is not changing, the use of our service from the summer population is increasing. So starting on page, the lower half of page 8 and into page 9, you will see the breakdown month to month by each type of inspection, and it's color-coded, and how each month is mostly spent. So if you'll notice in January and February, the bulk of our inspections are septic systems. Those are new permits that are there, everything from percolation tests to witnesses at the Nantucket Harbor watershed. So it could be a relic of the regulations tightening, but it can also mean we're in the midst of a construction boom. So you'll see in the FY18 that well over half of all of our inspections in February were septic.
How has fertilizer changed over the last 3 years?
Over the last 3 years, you'll see in in April is when the fertilizing season starts, is when fertilizer inspection season starts. So you'll see a small build in the first April, but by the third April FY18, it is now about a fourth of the inspections that we do in April, and then come into May, it is well into about the third of what we do. It's a bulk.
Have we been citing people in fertilizer?
Most of them are
Or just telling them to do a better job?
Yes, most of them when we go do our checkups, we'll be driving by, we see the truck, we go in, we make sure that if they are applying fertilizer, they're applying the correct fertilizer and they're applying it correctly, and if they're not applying, we do still have to log it because we were there.
Right.
The new performance management system will log it in at a much deeper detail for this coming fiscal year, and I'll be able to tease it out as to how many people we've actually cited for fertilizing, not cited, but checked for actually fertilizing, or if we checked and they weren't fertilizing. But so far, only one ticket has been given since the one May, and it was a big ticket. If you remember, it was in the newspaper last year. It was a $1,800 ticket, and that ticket sent shockwaves across the community. And at the next fertilizer training, it was almost standing room only. So it really put people into compliance. And then on the very last page, page 10, you'll just see a line chart of how many inspections we've done per month over the last 3 years. This is over the course of the entire time. I just put in a basic trend line down here so that you can look at it. So you can see that on average, we're doing 192 inspections a month. And that breaks out to about 22 work days every month on average. That's 8.5 inspections per day. And that's just in the field. That's not counting the paperwork. That's not counting follow-up inspections. That's not counting citations or any of the other administrative duties that we have to do. So if we do a basic average of inspections, not counting percolation tests, which can be a minimum of 2 hours, that's about 5 hours and 48 minutes of field time per day. So our inspectors are in the field almost 6 hours every day, not counting lunch and not counting paperwork. If there was ever an argument for if we need another person for an environmental inspector, this is where this is going. I will be asking for an extra employee this coming fiscal year for this coming town meeting. And then you'll see the list of what I need to finish on the last page, page 11. I'm trying to break down into the infectious disease report. We can go over tick-borne diseases, which I emailed out. That will be put into this year in review. Other illnesses of note, so how many foodborne illness complaints we had received, how many foodborne illnesses were confirmed, and I can get that information out. And then chronic disease, we've been seeing issues with the addiction issues here on the island. Mental health, I forgot to put in there. How many times the fire department has given Narcan, how many mental health people had to be shipped off island to get to the intervention beds, things like that. So I will be putting all of that in the report. You will get a full report in the September meeting. And then that's a great segue into our tick-borne disease discussion. I've emailed out the tick-borne disease numbers. These are HIPAA compliant at this point. For the public, if they were to see the packet, they'll see that there's numbers that say less than 5. If you see a less than 5 on in the chart, it means that there was at least one case of this tick-borne disease, but less than 5 cases. At 5 cases, we can report the numbers. This is due to the ability of somebody to identify who was infected with this tick-borne illness. So, for example, if somebody was infected with tularemia and it was only in one person, then you would say, well, I knew John was infected with tularemia, so he must be the number 1. He must be that person. So you'll see that this in 2018 up to yesterday morning, there have been 33 cases of Lyme disease from January 1st to yesterday here on Nantucket. These are confirmed or suspect illness that have been reported to the state. So if the doctor who is doing the assessment doesn't report it, if they were to just say that's a bullseye rash, here's your Z-Pack, and never reports it, we don't get that number, which is why we've been pushing to get that reporting done. In comparison, last year, the total number of confirmed Lyme disease on the island was 65 cases, and we're already at 33. So we've had a pretty wet summer, so we might be seeing that number spike soon. Happy to report that we have had 0 rickettsial 0 Rocky Mountain spotted fever, 0 confirmed tularemia this year, but we are hearing anecdotal stories of tularemia. I don't know if they had been if it has been diagnosed and seroconfirmed in a laboratory. It wasn't done on the island, so we didn't get that information. But as far as I know, it's as far as the State Department of Health is concerned, that number is 0, which is what they've reported to us. There have been a number of what's marked as other tick-borne diseases, which is everything from STARI, which is sudden tick something illness. I forgot what STARI stands for. That's an acronym, or Powassan, or any of the other tick-borne illnesses that are not common in Massachusetts yet, but as the Lone Star tick becomes more and more common here, we'll be seeing more of those other illnesses. We've had 0 amoebiasis, but we've actually had 9 babesia this year. And the reason I emphasize that is because last year we had 30. So even though we're hearing about it more, the actual number is a little bit lower. The confirmed cases are a little bit lower. So it's really surprising on that one. And then Ehrlichia is down to 0, and Anaplasma has been less than 5 this year. So in comparison to last year, we are actually having a surprisingly mild summer in comparison, except for in Lyme, where our Lyme is climbing a little bit quicker than it was at this time last year.
Roberta, if you go back to like 2004, 2005, there were like 300 cases.
Yes.
So are we at a point where we don't need to reduce the deer? Are we? Are we? I mean,
Actually, the 2013 data of confirmed Lyme disease on the island, in 2013, we hit 224 confirmed cases.
yeah, it was even larger before that.
Yeah, well, the numbers that were...
This is important because if we're going to make arguments about reducing deer and we have 33 cases, it's going to be hard to convince anyone it's a big issue.
One of the things that we're thinking is the actual educational campaigns that are out there are having more of an effect than we've expected. If you've noticed in the last year, tick-borne diseases, especially Lyme, is on the national news. They're really pushing it out.
I would like to think some of our efforts went into that, but who knows?
Yeah.
Or is it well, it's wet now, but it was dry and hot before.
It was really dry last summer, and if you remember, it wasn't as hot, but it was still hot enough that the tick were active. And last summer we had 66 cases. The year before that, though, 65 cases, sorry. The year before that, though, we had twice that number.
Yeah.
And it
Before
was...
that, I can remember 300 and 400 numbers.
Yes, and it was the way it was being reported. It's coming in waves.
Is it weather? Is it global warming? Is it education? Is it lack of reporting? Or is it just the way it is?
Isn't there a delay in you getting the statistics from the hospital?
There's definitely a small delay because they have to report it to the state, and then the state has to serial confirm it through the laboratory. So for all we know, there can be 33 people waiting in the laboratory right now, and will blow us past last year's number. But you'll see in the information I pushed out to you, the way the trend is going, we're in that little valley, that natural valley in tick-borne illnesses. I would fully expect that number will go up if there is no tick management, tick, deer, mice, any sort of tick-borne illness management. So I would say yes, we can kill off the deer and put in immune mice. We will always see some level of tick-borne illnesses based on other vectors, whether they're like the Lone Star tick, for example, if they're on dogs, or cats or things like that, because you cannot put permethrin on a cat. That's what few people don't realize. Permethrin is actually lethal to cats. So the same treatment that you can put on a dog and that you put on your own clothing, you cannot use if you have a cat in your household. So it's interesting issues like that. So we have reason to believe that it can go up, but we're continuing to monitor it.
Initially, when this board was first formed, it was the reporting, lack thereof, because of the labor intensity of the form. I don't know if that's changed, if it's been improved.
So the previous before Elizabeth Harris took over the reporting at the hospital, we had Stephen. I forgot Stephen's last name, but he did a very good job at getting these anecdotal reports and actually getting the reports on the paper. So we were hearing 200, 300, 400, 500 cases. The doctors were saying this, and that was getting reported, but the data wasn't showing it because some of these cases weren't being confirmed in the laboratory, or it was the practitioners have gotten so good at recognizing the symptoms here on Nantucket that they've sometimes never even ordered the laboratory report, so they would get revoked in the state in Maven. Stephen was very good at getting that report followed through with, and Elizabeth has been great at maintaining that. So I feel confident in these confirmed numbers. Everything from, I would say, from 2000 to about 2010, Maven was brand new. They had gone through so many iterations that the reporting system was, I wouldn't say fractured, but labor intensive. And sometimes it would get lost because the laboratory follow-up wasn't happening. And this was across the state. But after around, I would say around 2010, they really had it nailed down. So I would say we have about 8 years of good, reliable state level data. And unfortunately, we're still working off of the 2010 census, which tells us 10,000 people. So every case shoots our standardized incidence ratio up and up and up, because every single case is worth more, regardless of what our summer population is. It's that unfortunate relic of statistics in epidemiology, but it's something we have to live with. Even on those numbers, we're looking pretty good this year.
Does anybody have any other questions? Motion to adjourn?
I just have one question. Last time we sent back to the land bank a request. Have they followed any further on that?
They haven't followed up with us yet.
Okay, all right. You haven't got any feedback where they're moving forward with a septic system?
I haven't had any feedback of that, whether they're moving forward or whether they've
Okay.
not. But the feedback we did receive was, why was it denied? That sort of thing.